or dusty, anything ragged or rotten or rusty. Yes, I love trash.
Issues 115 to 119 feature art by John Buscema in the first comic, with Gene Colan picking up art for the remainder of the issues. The Red Skull returns, sporting the Cosmic Cube. He decides the best way to break Cap's will is to switch bodies with each other. Then the Skull can ruin Cap's life while Cap is busy being on the run. Cap goes to the Avengers for help, but realizes they don't believe him and that he's on his own. From there, the Skull transports Cap to the Island of the Exiles in the hopes that they'll kill Cap, thinking he's the Skull. It's a silly plot device in hindsight. The Skull has the Cosmic Cube with which he can do anything, so you'd think he'd consider a bigger scheme than changing bodies with Cap. It's kind of aiming low, if you ask me. Issue 117 is the first appearance of Sam Wilson, the Falcon. Cap comes across Sam when he manages to fight the Exiles off with the help of Redwing, Falcon's bird. Sam says he came to the island after responding to an ad from the Exiles for a hunting falcon, which doesn't really make sense. It's been established by the Skull that the Exiles are marooned on the island. How did they manage to post an ad in the New York paper? Message in a bottle? And if they can get off the island, why stay on it in the first place? At one point, Steve uses clay-like mud to mold his features so he won't be recognized. The Skull, watching from New York in an earlier scene, notes that none of the Exiles know what he looks like under the mask. So one would think what Steve does is a moot point, and to be honest, it is. If anything, it's a rather obvious way for the artist to show Steve clearly in the panels without giving away what the Skull really looks like to the viewer. It's kind of a letdown, but I can accept that Stan wouldn't want to reveal the Skull's features. While Cap's with Sam, he convinces him that the peasant island people the Exiles rule need a symbol to help them free themselves, and trains Sam to become the Falcon. They make short work of the Exiles with the help of the Islanders, and things come to a climax when the Skull transports Cap and Sam to his castle in Germany for a final confrontation. I guess it's been sitting there undisturbed, just waiting for his return. He also decides to dispense with appearances and changes Cap and himself back to their former self. Imagine Sam's surprise when he finds out the guy he's been training with has been none other than Captain America. Throughout the last 3 issues, there are one-page panels of AIM bringing MODOK back to life and him ordering them to find and destroy the Cosmic Cube. If you can't figure out the resolution to this story, PM me and I'll tell you the obvious. It's another ending of plot convenience, which I found to be rather weak, considering the build-up. Does MODOK know he just saved Cap from being beaten by the Skull? If he ever finds out, I bet he'll kick himself. One last gripe. In issue 118, in a one-page panel, we see Rick Jones rip up an autographed picture of Cap and give up the mantle of Bucky. This is due to Rick crossing paths with the Skull when he was in Cap's guise. I hate the way Stan writes Rick here. He comes across as an emotional child who would rather run away while convincing himself he's growing up by shedding himself of the Bucky costume instead of being a man and confronting Cap about his behavior. I don't know, I had just hoped the short experience as Bucky would have matured Rick, and instead it backfired. Overall, while the story is rather contrived and ill-conceived, there are a couple moments that are quite intriguing. While the Skull is dealing with Cap's adoring public in issue 118, which is rather amusing, I do like how they come across as fanatical and willing to do anything to meet him. It's a nice insight into how easily people can get out of control when they're starstruck. I also have to commend the artwork. Both John and Gene do really impressive work. Unfortunately, though, I can't recommend reading this arc, and I hope things improve. Issues 120 to 127 are another string of self-contained one-shot stories. Cap crosses paths with the Man-Brute, Scorpion, MODOK, and AIM, the Mandarin, and even helps the Falcon clear his name in one. Throughout these issues, Cap becomes less and less social, cutting himself off from the people he's gotten close to and the outside world that idolizes him. Cap complains about being lonely, but does nothing about it. Is Reed Richards not returning phone calls? Doesn't Tony Stark want someone to drink with? I can somewhat feel for Steve as a man out of time, but ultimately, he has no one else to blame but himself. The more he keeps himself from socializing and familiarizing himself with the new world, the worse he's going to get, and it's aggravating to see him like this. It's like I want to shake him and yell, "Look, dummy! Look at what you're throwing away!" Another thing I don't like is that Cap avoids Sharon because she's an active S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and thus is constantly in harm's way, saying that he couldn't live without her, but heck! He keeps going on and on about how much he loves her and can't stand to be away from her. Cap is being selfish and demanding, and that's about as far from love as a person can get. If you love someone, you don't force them to do what you want or restrict your exposure to them, regardless of the good intentions. Would Steve give up being Cap if Sharon asked him? Would it be fair for her to ask Steve such a thing? Sure, Sharon's duties put her in danger, but people die every day just by walking outside or crossing the street. He has to let her do what she wants, and if she wants to stay active in S.H.I.E.L.D., Steve should be accommodating while still expressing his concern. He has to come to terms with her mortality. Until he does, his love for her is a farce. What upsets me the most is that in 124, Sharon and Nick actually cave in to Cap's unreasonable demands. Granted, she stays with S.H.I.E.L.D., but she becomes an inactive agent with a desk job. Then when she goes to aid him later in the issue, he yells at her saying that she lied to him about becoming inactive and storms away like a hurt little kid. Show some backbone, people. Cap is wrong in this instance. It doesn't really make him very heroic, but then it seems like that's Stan's intent. Stan does a masterful job of humanizing Steve with his own flaws and less than popular ideals. Things could have been improved, though, if Stan wrote Sharon with a little more independent thought, sort of a foil for Steve's emotional tirades. She's supposed to be a modern woman who is just finding her voice, but Stan writes her as if she's ready and willing to step right back into the kitchen, and that's really a missed opportunity. And if not Sharon, anyone. Someone who sees what Cap is doing, or really what he's not doing, and tries to show him the error of his ways. Heck, even someone to yell at him for acting the fool would have been refreshing. Again, while the foreground stories are kind of forgettable, what really stands out is the soap opera unfolding, if only in Cap's mind. Gene Colan continues his run as artist in these issues, and while I don't favor him as much as Steranko or Kirby, he does turn in some really impressive work. I wouldn't go so far as to say that these issues are required reading, but perhaps give them a try on a rainy day. Thank you for listening. Please tune in again to another Bastard Reads. I'll probably be doing some more Captain America pretty soon, so keep your eyes out for that, and don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe.